Hello, it's Steve here. Today is Saturday the 11th of August 2018 and this is my fifth entry into my video journal all about CBT for emetophobia. So just a quick trigger warning as always, if you also struggle with emetophobia, I will be discussing a few topics and using terms that you might find uncomfortable. I do recommend if you can try and persevere, it will be helpful for you. Part of the CBT process involves discussing these things and exposing yourself to those fears, so it's useful to get some practice when you can. So an update from me, this week has been fairly uneventful. My girlfriend's been away for the week, so I've just sort of been left to myself. And I think I've had a lot more time to think about things, and I think that's helped me realise that there's a lot of things going on that are stressing me out that kind of compound on top of the phobias that I'm already struggling with. So one thing for a start is that I'm definitely a bit of a hypochondriac. I definitely have a habit of expecting the worst anytime I feel any kind of symptoms of anything. But on top of that, I've realised that there's a lot of things going on in my life in general that are kind of creating stress and tension. I'm kind of struggling with money a bit sometimes. I work for myself, so my income's a bit unpredictable, which is kind of just part and parcel of being self-employed, but sometimes it just means I don't have the money that I need and it can be a bit stressful. I originally moved to Brighton in September with the intention of completing a master's. I've done 1 year of it out of 2 and I'm actually planning on dropping out now. So that's kind of stressful, but also the financial situation that comes with that is a bit more stressful as well. And I think there's other things as well. So I've always been a passionate musician. I've always kind of tried to practice and play music when I can. And I came to Brighton with the hopes of doing that. But just because I've not had the money, the space, the time to actually practice and do anything with it, I've not really been getting out. And that means that I've not really had many chances to meet people and make friends. And I think I've spent a lot of time in and I've got into habits of staying home. So all of these things are kind of on my mind a lot, and I think I've got a lot more time to think about them. So I think that's probably feeding into the anxiety that I'm already having. But at the same time, there has been some progress. And so I had my appointment on Thursday as always, and we talked about what I've been doing and how things have been going. So last time I was set the challenge of not carrying a plastic bag with me wherever I go. And we just kind of talked about how that had been okay and I'd managed with it. And it's just one of many behaviours, so it's starting to work through those and make some progress. But obviously you can't just stop at one, you've got to keep working through all the other behaviours that you have, which again, you know, that's my list of things that I do. So I'm kind of trying to work my way into more of these things and trying to kind of identify more behaviours that I'm creating because of the phobia itself. So we talked a bit more again about those behaviours and about the different things that I do, and we looked beyond the literal actions that I'm carrying out and more into the actual thoughts that are happening inside my mind. So for anyone else who struggles with emetophobia, you'll know that there are lots of things that you'll do that you use to prevent yourself from being sick. In reality, you're probably just not being sick because you don't need to be sick. However, we convince ourselves that it is these different behaviours and these thought patterns that actually keep us safe, whether it's using ginger or antiemetics, whether it's trying to distract ourselves or carrying a plastic bag or making sure we always have water, or avoiding busy places, avoiding being trapped, avoiding public transport, all these different things that we've somehow trained ourselves to believe if we do these things we might be sick. The reality is you probably never were going to be sick anyway, and doing those things doesn't increase the chance of you being sick. So for me, there's a lot of things in there that I do generally day to day, and there's a lot of things that I've recognised that I do when I do feel nauseous. And I think part of me believes that it's the actions that I'm creating and the way that I'm holding myself and the way that I'm breathing and the way that I'm kind of controlling my body that's stopping me from being sick. So what I'm trying to do is to train myself that actually I'm not being sick because I don't need to be sick. Your body would not use up something like that for anxiety or for fear. It's not going to make you sick, and trying to remember that and trying to train myself to believe that is all part of this process. So I've got a few tasks. Obviously I need to try and spend more time out of the house, try and spend more time around people. These are things that I've been avoiding just because of the phobia itself, but also trying to recognise the thoughts that I have and the way that I start to think whenever I start to feel nauseous. So there's two things that often happen with me. The first is that I try and convince myself that I'm not going to be sick, that there's nothing wrong with me. But it's also kind of, sometimes it's done in an aggressive way though, and I try and kind of I sort of get angry with myself for feeling the way that I do. But I'm starting to learn that a better way to do that really is to be more compassionate and to be more understanding of myself, recognizing the symptoms that I have and actually acknowledging them and allowing them to be and to pass through that situation. The problem with phobias is that the more you resist the thing that you're scared of and the more that you fight the feelings that you get because of it, the harder it is to train yourself that there's actually nothing to be scared of. So for example, if someone is scared of spiders and they walk into a room and they see there's a spider on the wall and they get scared, they'll leave that room and then they don't go back. But all that does is it calms them down briefly because they're now away from the spider. But all that's going on is that spider is still in that room. And every time they think about going to that room, the fear comes back, even without actually seeing the spider. And they kind of train themselves that actually, oh, I can't go to that place because there's a spider there. And the exact same thing happens with emetophobia, that we avoid things and we create behaviours to try and compensate for the nausea that we might feel. The way to get through these phobias, and it's the same for all of them, is to experience the fear, acknowledge it, allow it to exist, and then let it naturally pass. So if it was arachnophobia, if you were scared of that spider, staying in that room, even watching the spider, being in that same room and knowing that it's there, and knowing that you're scared and acknowledging that the fear is passing is better than trying to get away from it. Because realistically, the spider's not going to do anything. It's just going to stay on the wall where it was. It has no intention of jumping over and attacking you. It's just being a spider. And the more time you spend sat there watching it and realising that it's actually not doing anything, the easier it is to realise that actually it's not a threat. And it's the same with emetophobia. The more you can do to acknowledge the feelings that you have, the nausea that you might be feeling, and acknowledging that actually it's nothing to be scared of, nothing's going to hurt you, it's going to be okay. And ultimately, even being able to recognise that if you are sick, if it does happen, you'll be okay. It will pass, and the next day you'll probably be fine. Even within a few hours you'll probably be fine. But that's probably a bit further on. That's not something that needs to happen straight away. Instead, it's all about realising that not doing certain behaviours or doing things that you've been avoiding are not going to cause the terrible thing that you think is going to happen. And that's kind of the process of CBT. It's just a matter of experiencing those things that you fear, realising that they're nothing to be scared of, and then being able to accept them into your life a bit more often. And with looking at the thoughts that you have and the way that your mind processes these fears, we started talking also about mindfulness and things like body scanning and all these meditation techniques that are really useful. So mindfulness, if you're not familiar, is actually all about focusing in on yourself and being aware of the current place and situation and being aware of yourself and your body in that particular moment. It's kind of a focusing training technique. One thing you can do to practice is try to focus on your breathing. So you find a relaxed spot, you kind of close your eyes and just focus on the breathing. Not just the fact that you're breathing, but the way that your body feels as you breathe, how your body expands and relaxes, and where you feel it in your shoulders, in your chest, at the top of your stomach, wherever it might be. And beyond that, being able to focus on every other part of your body and really being aware of yourself and how you feel, how your feet feel against the floor, how your clothes feel on your body, how your hair feels against your ears, all of these different things that you kind of don't acknowledge, but they're all kind of going on. And with that, thinking of the symptoms that you have, focusing on those symptoms and being aware and understanding what it is that you're really feeling. Because I think we'll all have a habit of trying to not focus on it and trying to ignore it and distract ourselves, when really what we're doing is we're telling ourselves that that's something to be scared of and that's something that we don't want to think about. The more you try and think about it, the more you kind of acknowledge it and allow it to exist and be part of you, the easier it becomes to accept it. And when you start accepting it, that's when you start to become less anxious of it, and in turn you'll probably find that that's when the symptoms start to subside as well, because nausea really is a symptom of anxiety, and the majority of the time that you feel it, that's where it's coming from. That's definitely the case for me anyway. I also found a really good article online that someone shared on Reddit, which I'll include in the description underneath, which just talks about how to acknowledge whether you're experiencing a fear or whether you're actually experiencing sickness. And I think anyone with emetophobia will have a habit of immediately jumping to the worst case scenario. I feel a bit nauseous, I ate something a couple of hours ago, this must be food poisoning, I'm probably going to be sick, I need to prepare for that, and I'm going to panic for the next hour about it. When in reality, you've probably just started those thoughts earlier on as soon as you ate, and then you started feeling the symptoms of digestion, which is a very normal thing that we all do. We all feel it and it all happens, and immediately assuming that this is the worst thing it could possibly be, when really it's just normal and it's fine. And starting to recognise this and start to realise that what you're panicking about is just anxiety itself. When you start to realise that, you can start to calm yourself down. The best way to think about it really is think about all the times that you've felt nauseous and how many of those times have actually resulted in you being sick. Very, very few, if any. I know that's the way for me, that I'm very rarely sick, and you're probably the same. The more you can remind yourself of that fact, the more you can realise that actually what you're feeling is not worth fearing and that you'll actually be okay. So that's where things are at the moment. I'm still working through lots of behaviours. Coming up next week, I've got a big challenge actually, because I'll be going to a festival on Thursday. I've got to take a train for about 3.5 hours to get to Bristol, and then another 40-minute car journey. Fortunately, I'll be staying in a hotel, so I don't have to worry about camping, but then I'll be at the festival all day, each day, for 3 days. So it's a bit unnerving. It's, you know, something I'm quite worried about, but I'm trying to remind myself about what I'm going to be doing while I'm there, how I'm going to enjoy that, and trying to take away the focus from the fear to the enjoyment that I'll actually have. So I think I'll update you next week when I've actually come back from that festival, and I'll say how things went, but I'm sure it's going to be okay. So that's it from me. Hopefully that's been useful. As always, any questions or comments, do leave them underneath and I'll be happy to chat with you. Otherwise, I hope you're doing well, and I'll see you next time. Thanks. Bye.